So join me here on the Broadcasters Podcast. I'm here with an award-winning broadcaster, LGBTQ plus trailblazer, multimedia personality known for his bold voice in radio, music, and advocacy. The first openly gay talk show host, along with his then partner, Andrew Howard, at KFI, more similarly talk radio in Los Angeles, spent decades shaping conversations on culture, politics, and equality. Now he's hosting the really Karel podcast you can find on YouTube.
Just the Karel cast.
Karel, yes, all across the world. So I'm here with Karel. Thanks for being on with me. Or I don't know about the full name, but we'll just go with Karel. Thanks for making time.
Oh, it's like Cher. It's just one name. I got tired of all those names. Actually, it was funny years ago. When I first started recording music, I also wrote for Billboard. And my friend at the time, Hannah Bolte, she said, "Well, you can't send your album to Billboard to review it under your name because you already write for Billboard, and they'll just think, oh, it's some writer who wants to be they won't know that you were a singer before you were a writer." I'm like, "Well, what do I do?" She says, "I'll change your name." I don't want to change my name. So my late husband, Andrew, went to this dictionary, opened it up, and looked at Charles, and Karel was the first derivation of Charles. It's Czech for Chuck.
Exactly.
And in 1993, Karel was born on West Street in Los Angeles. I know his birthplace.
And I like what you've done in terms of like some of the music you do. I know you do quite a bit of covers you've recorded as well. So the one right now with Sylvester and
Do
Patrick
You Want to
Colley.
Funk is my latest single, and that was born of the time. Everything old is new again, including hatred, bigotry, homophobia. It's back in vogue again. Yes. And in 1984, when Do You Want to Funk came out, we were at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. We had no rights. Our bars were being raided with impunity. People were being followed home and photographed by the police with impunity. Yeah. And yet Sylvester, this fabulous gender non-binary creation of his own, long before there were these pronouns and everything else.
Fantastic music.
Oh yeah! In fact, I knew him. I met and knew Sylvester.
Yeah,
and I met him. I knew him.
When you decided to go and do the song, did it have anything to do with the movie Argyle? Because they decided to play it a couple times in that movie.
No, but I did love that was featured in Argyle. No, what it really had to do with was when that song came out, and I was 22 years old. People were like, "You're under attack," the community, and we were. But Sylvester and his music made us forget that, made us get to the dance floor and dance. Also, I knew Sylvester and one of his background singers, well, I know all of his background singers, but Jeannie Tracy and I are still good friends. And Jeannie was the inspiration for the song Do You Want to Funk? Sylvester went over to see Jeannie. She was recording a song called I'm Your Jeannie. One of the hooks was about funk. He liked that. Yeah. He went back to Patrick Colley, his collaborator, and they wrote Do You Want to Funk? So Jeannie and I are friends, and Jeannie and I were talking about the time and the era and how for gays it feels very much like the 1980s again. And I thought, I've covered Sylv's songs because my voice and his voice are similar, but I've never done that one because it's the holy grail of his songs. And she said, "Boo, you ought to do it." So I did it. She did backgrounds, which is remarkable. Stuff. The woman that actually inspired the song.
Yeah, like the production. Really
and now it's charting. It's doing well. It's being played on radio. It's doing well. It's a way for me to get my pronouns from has been to still here. So I decided that my pronouns have been has been too long, and I'm going to go to still here.
But here's the thing I got to ask you. So we have this thing where there's always been representation, trying to go and bring people of first diverse voices, diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, diverse lifestyles. Radio always felt like the radio was always going to be the place where you could do that. That's the haven where you could have. And again,
radio is the most homophobic space on the planet.
No,
are you kidding me?
But where else could you have gotten to go and do a show like you and Andrew did to do at that time? Or you have other stations that were different formats, different ethnicities.
It was completely an experiment. And was one that was under a microscope constantly.
Of course.
We had to run faster, jump higher. We had to there were rules in my entire life in broadcasting, from KFI to KGO Radio, ABC San Francisco, the #1 station there, where I was on for 12 years. Everything that applied to other hosts did not apply to me. I had different things that happened to me at KGO and KFI would be litigious in today's world.
Oh, yeah.
But back then, as a gay person, you just had to suck it up. If you wanted the gig, You had to do what they say. You
But
know,
talent
I remember on
supersedes the
KFI.
controversy, Carol. It really
Well,
is talent
I
supersedes
remember
everything.
when we got the job, they had to hire extra staff for all the hate calls. Because we got, I mean, it was totally a fairy tale. You know, I didn't want to be in talk radio ever. I was out promoting a record on Groove Radio in Los Angeles
Oh, I
on
remember.
on James Poorman Trenton's show. Poorman, he and I were friends, and I was promoting my record on Jelly Bean Recordings. Jelly Bean Benitez. I was signed to his label.
Wow.
And I went to their morning show, and their guest that they had coming in was late.
Yeah.
So they asked me to stay. So I did. And I had a good, fun couple hours with them. On my brick cell phone, the Motorola brick, my husband called me on the way home because he didn't go. And he said, they're going to ask you back. And I said, no, it was just to promote the record. Well, before I got home, they called me on my cell phone to ask me back the next day. So I did about 10 sit-ins with Poor Man. And then someone named Malcolm Berman approached the program director at Groove and asked him if he knew of someone that could do a gay show called Different After Dark on a small station in West Hollywood called KYPA, which was a bartered station where he bought the time. He recommended me. I thought it was bullcrap. I met this guy at a hotel lobby in Long Beach, wanting to invite him to my house. But it wasn't bullcrap. He put me on the air with a lesbian co-host, which I did not get along with. But my late husband, Andy, came with me anyway because it was the weekend and the evening, and I wasn't going to leave him at home alone. And suddenly, after about 6 months, he became my co-host. Unbeknownst to me, he came on to do an editorial about Rosie O'Donnell coming out. And we argued about it. We argued about everything. We argued about it. And afterwards, Malcolm fired the lesbian and told Andrew he was the co-host. He didn't even want to be in radio. He didn't want to be the co-host. But they made it clear that if he didn't, then I couldn't work there either. So he went ahead and said, okay. We did that show for about 8 months, and then Triangle Broadcasting picked us up. They wanted to start a gay network. They put us on in Seattle, even though they were in Palm Springs. They put us on in Palm Springs and Seattle from our home in Long Beach. And after about a year of that, I asked Malcolm Berman, who was still working with me, what the number one station in the country was. He said, well, that's KFI Los Angeles, but they'll never listen to you. You've only been on radio 2 years. You're on small stations, and you're gay, and you're a gay couple. And this is the station of Rush Limbaugh and Dr. Laura. They're never going to listen to you.
At the other side of the spectrum, you also had Phil Hendry. You had people like Tom Likas that came out of that whole realm. So, and David G. Hall, who first of all, I have been the biggest fan of Phil Hendry for almost 30 years. Listening to him because I was aboard up at the time when Phil Hendry was running syndicated, and I'd laugh my ass off on some of the stuff he'd said. And so, like, that's your show that you did with Andrew. That was that before Phil's slot or after?
Yeah, we were afternoon drive, and then Phil came on at 7.
But one of the things was that Phil, talking about controversy, he kind of like opened the door for things to happen. Like any kind of controversy.
Was one of the most. Yeah, he was one of the most, and still, Phil and I are still very, very good friends. I just went to LA to see him in his one-man show. We're still very good friends.
Please give him my best. I tell him he is radio gold. He still is. I wish he was still.
He is radio gold. He just got put into the Radio Hall of Fame. I remember Phil coming to me and Andrew. Like after our second show, he came up to us and he said, don't worry about your ratings. And I said, what? And he said, never worry about your ratings. He goes, you just go in and do the show that you and Andrew want to do and let David. And David Hall and I are best. We're family. We're not friends. We're family. We talk all the time. I've watched his kids grow up. There's some personal issues with his children that he actually turned to me for help with, it's been one of the most remarkable friendships of my life. And I always forget that he's the number one radio programmer in the world. I always forget that because he's just David. And he still begins our phone calls with the exact same way he would begin when we were at KFI, which is, hi, Chuck, it's David. You're not in trouble. Because when your program director calls you, there's only one of two reasons. They want to do something or you're in trouble. So he would always call and say, he would call Phil and say, hi, Phil, it's David, you're not in trouble. Hi, Bill Handel, it's David, you're not in trouble. So that he still does those calls to this day that way and says, you're not in trouble. I would say that I'm not doing it right. But David, put himself on the line. It was a grand experiment. I sent the tape to KFI. Made friends, always in broadcasting, make friends with the executive assistant. They're the most important person in the room. Forget the program director, forget the associate program director, make friends with the secretary. And so I did. Her name was Stella Marquand. And Stella put our tape on top. Mark Austin Thomas, the assistant PD, heard it and for some strange reason recommended it to David Hall. David called us in and stood us up. And we didn't like that. So he called us in again. And I said, only if you're sure you're going to be there. And we went. And his first question was, why do you want to be on KFI? I said, I don't know crap about KFI. I don't listen to talk radio. I just heard you were number one.
Yeah.
And he laughed. And suddenly we started getting fill-in work. And then suddenly we had to ask for like badges to get in the building. And then suddenly we were filling out employee paperwork and we're like hired. And we didn't even know. We're like, I think we're hired, you know? Yeah. And we became fill-ins. And then we were given a weekend show. And that created a lot of controversy. And then John and Ken left to go on to KABC to have the lowest rated afternoon drive show or morning show in history. And we took their place in afternoon drive opposite Tom Likas and beat him very well. And then Phil would follow us. So we all became family.
The market you had and the talent you had as well, amazing. One of those things in the 90s right there of talk radio, what we had. Then they made the change where, I don't know, where talk radio, when you had the AMs had to become more conservative. But the thing was, there was a time where you could mix both. I mean, I'm thinking about in Miami.
Well, very few people did that. David was a pioneer in that. In fact, one of the billboards for KFI said,
that. Because WIOD in Miami before, where Phil Hendry came also and made a stint over here, there's Pete Bolger and the folks over there that we'd have Randy Rhodes along with, Neil Rogers along with, Rick and Sons. And there were like certain shows that could be conservative or liberal and be full spectrum programming. But then we had to change once. The thing is that at that time when you were over there at KFI, there was a change in management. So Chance of Media,
there were four changes of management.
Right. You were going through all that. Now, when you had all those kind of changes,
we got there with the Cox sisters, and they were fabulous and wonderful. And they had to fly out. They flew out, and our GM, Harvey, had to meet with them. David had to meet with them. We had to go on an advertiser tour with Ro Hernandez, our GSM, where advertisers wouldn't shake our hands because it was the 90s. Andrew had HIV. That was well known. Oh, okay. And, they wouldn't shake our hands. And so they turned down those ads. Hooked on Phonics was $1 million advertising, which they then said they could just take their ads somewhere else when the guy wouldn't get up in the meeting and shake our hands. They subsequently became one of our biggest endorsements. But, it was a dog and pony show. We had every camera in there, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of them all the time to see if this grand experiment was going to work. It did. It worked. And we broke what I call the pink ceiling in broadcasting when we became the first openly gay male couple in history on any radio station anywhere.
On a station that also would have Dr. Laura, that would have Rush Limbaugh, that would have Bill Handel, all these folks that are more or less on the conservative side, you would think, and just being allowed to go and just be in the playground.
Well, Handel didn't used to be that, Handel wasn't that conservative. Money changed him. The billboard used to read, in LA, it used to read a doctor, which was Dr. Laura. Bill Handel's a lawyer. So the billboard read a doctor, a lawyer, and them. And everyone knew that we were the them because you got Rush Limbaugh, you got Dr. Laura, and then you got the gay guys, and then you got Phil Hendry, who's 150 people all in one.
Oh, yeah.
We used to love to just sit and watch at 6:55 when Phil was getting ready. And then, we'd just sit and watch his first 10, 15 minutes because it was just so schizophrenically beautiful. Oh, man. That's how I met Howard Stern. He came in to watch Phil because they're both repped by Don. Don Buchwald. Phil is repped by Don Buchwald. And so, of course, Howard was too. So we would watch Phil. And then after our second week of being there, we were driving home listening to Phil. And all of a sudden, he's all, KFI AM 640. I am Karel and I'm Andrew. And I'm like, oh, my God, he's doing us. And he did us. He did us for an hour, which was really a high honor. But it was media consolidation it was media consolidation that ruined media and continues to ruin. And there is now the threat before Congress of them allowing even more consolidation.
Oh, the deregulation.
Right now, you can own 5 FMs and 3 AMs in any market. They want to remove that. So a company can own as many FMs and as many AMs as they'd like. That would mean that in a market like LA, you have one person programming all the music from somewhere in Iowa.
With
or
companies
Wisconsin
that are owned by private equity that are also loaded in debt that keep getting bailed out in bankruptcy. I have been thumping on that for years.
Excuse me, my chocolate is getting messy.
Yes. So, but the other thing too is that I think also what didn't help is that you had people in these corporations that are coming in. They're not radio people. Okay, they're not David G. Hall. They're not, some of these others that understand the business. And then what happened was the talk radio thing. I got to ask you about this too. Was the change of FM talk? The whole idea of we got to go Jerry Springer like, we got to get a little more salacious. So then you get Tom Likas moving over there, Howard Stern moves over, and then make a whole format about it. And it lasts a couple of years. And there's stations that are trying to still linger around doing this, but I think that changed to FM talk and trying to go like the man talk, this frat house kind of deal. I think that is what ruined talk radio in the first place. And also, no one was ever set to get rid of the mafia that is like the Hannitys of the world, or Glenn Beck or Mark Levin and all these other folks that have stayed around that should not be there.
Well, what truly has happened is they have tried to maximize profits, minimize expenses, which means get rid of talent. And so I was fired from KGO for the sole reason I wouldn't take a less than union pay scale.
Yeah.
They wanted to union bust KGO. Cumulus wanted to union bust it. And they started firing their hosts that were union, from Ron Owens, on down the line. All of them. In fact, the way that KGO did it was the worst of any radio station that I've ever heard of. They had a glass room at KGO called the Fishbowl, overlooked the bay there in San Francisco. I had already been fired, but Ray hadn't been. Ray Taliaferro, Bernie Ward, all of them, Gene Burns, Ron Owens, all of them. So they call a meeting, and they go into the meeting, into the Fishbowl, and in walks the new GM with a lady with a bunch of file folders. He walks up to the front of the room, and here are people who established the #1 station in the Bay Area for 30 years. And they are household names. They are huge talents in talk radio. He walks to the front of the room, says, "We are changing the mission of KGO Radio. We're going in a new direction. Your programs will no longer be needed. She's from HR. She'll be handling it." And then he walked out. That's all he said. That was it. So Ray Taliaferro turns to Gene Burns and says, "What just happened?" And Gene Burns says, "I think we all just got fired." And they all got fired in that moment. Every bit of huge radio talent that had made this station millions of dollars over the years were let go by one man in one sentence in a glass room. Period. End of story.
Poor management. What a travesty to that station over a decade. The fact that you got a 5 share back in 2010, ratings were really great. You had billings. You had people were just. It was a mainstay of San Francisco radio, and then they go ahead and let that thing just dwindle to the ground and just let everybody go and not even keep.
Subsequently, Gene Burns died. Yeah. Subsequently, Gene Burns died within 3 months of that happening, because we really believe it just broke his heart. Oh. And it was a terrible thing. So after that, David Hall and I sat.
Yeah.
And I said, "So what do I do now?" This is in 2015. And I had already started. It's funny, when KGO fired me, there was a dance station in San Francisco run by Don Parker, and they were appealing to the gay community. And Don thought what had happened to me was so wrong that they went talk from 9 to midnight just for me.
Oh, wow.
So this dance station went talk for 3 hours just for me.
Yeah, Energy.
Yes, Energy. Yep.
It's
Energy
a great station. I remember listening to it on streaming at the time, and I really loved it.
It was a great station, and the board op, Mark Acton, is still good friends of mine, and he does mornings in San Francisco for 20 years now. And so Don and I became friends, of course, and I syndicated that show through GCN, which is a weird little syndicator, but they're cool. I like them. It's the house I always call the house that gold built, as I call it, and because they sell all that gold stuff. And then CRN, Mike at CRN, took the show as well. And then finally, David's all, why are you worrying about syndicating and everything else? Just do a podcast. And this is in 2015. Podcasting was still, mezzo. And I'm like, well, why not add it in? So I did. And I've done a podcast ever since. But the reason being is there's as you said about the shift, radio plays whack-a-mole. Program directors nowadays, they think something's heading in a certain direction, so they go, oh, we got to go that direction. David had vision. David and several other, Mel Karmazin, there's a handful of program directors that didn't care what the trend was. They knew good radio when they heard it, and they were going to put it on.
Right.
Those days are over. And now it's got to turn a profit. The less you can spend on it, the better. So now they voice track. They have one host in 50 markets. They think, and now, of course, in the era of Trump, it is, if you're anything but a conservative, it's very hard to get on commercial radio. There's a few stations doing it in Seattle, Portland, a few other places, but New York, Chicago, but not that many, and not with that high of ratings, and certainly not with the budget. The KFI and KGOs that had opposite opinions, that had a diversity amongst their hosts, and that had funding. I mean, for Afternoon Drive, we would have so much fun. My God, one moment we're hanging out of a helicopter, over Big Bear Fires. The next minute we're doing fill-ups for $6.40 at a gas station in the valley, or I'm over in Ireland, or we had a budget. They would spend money on programming. I had a producer. That producer had an assistant. We had a call screener. We had an engineer. When we went cross country on the 10, because the 10 goes from Santa Monica to Jacksonville, Florida, we thought it would be fun to go all the way across and broadcast all the way across. Even with that, we brought my producer. We brought my board op. Of course, there was Andrew. So, and we pulled together sponsors and did that. Nowadays, radio stations aren't going to let their hosts get in a camper van and broadcast all the way across the United States. They're just not going to do that.
No.
They're not going to let their host go do lives. Hosts are never out in the community anymore. They're never out there doing lives, from wherever. I remember there was a hospital shooting in Garden Grove, and they sent us live. And I said, well, David, I still have my gun on me. I had been out shooting because I'm a progressive and gay, but I own a gun. And he said, you know what? This shooting happened because hospitals don't have security. You should walk in to cover this event with the gun in your backpack. And I did. I had a concealed carry permit, by the way, so that was legal. But it was to prove a point. Radio wouldn't let you do that anymore.
No,
they'd fear litigation.
So during the Columbine shooting, you actually talked to a student that was there, held hostage
under the desk.
Attack.
Yeah. Emiliano Limon. You're in the best hands in the world if you ever find yourself in the hands of Emiliano Limon. Wow. The largest Mexican in Ireland, as we called him, because he went to Ireland with us, and he was the largest and most Mexican person in Ireland. He was like 6'4" and Mexican, and he towered above everybody. That man, as a producer, I've been blessed to have so many great producers. Well, 4 great producers: Emiliano Limon, Jennifer Keller, Tiffany was good, and then at KGO I had some really great producers. Brian, of course, is the best. But Emiliano comes in. So we had been on air for a week that we had been an Afternoon Drive. We were just getting our, just figuring it all out. We get to work at noon, early, because we were in LA. And all of a sudden they're ushering us. They're all around us. They're handing us stuff. And they're like, you're going to go live. There's a school shooting. At the time, we didn't know from school shootings. They weren't commonplace back then. And so we get up and we're doing it. We're liaisoning with Terry Ray Elmer in the news department. And then suddenly Emiliano comes in and says, I have a guest for you on the line. She's at the school and she's under a desk. And I'm like, what? Like, how the hell? But we did. We talked to her. You could hear people screaming and yelling, behind her. Mm-hmm. It was moving. It was something. In fact, it was so much something that about a year or two later, we were down at the Hotel Del, Andrew and I, having a couple of days off. Yeah. We were driving back and they call us and say, there's a shooting in Santee. Where are you? And we're like, oh my God, we're at the Santee exit. We're like right here. And they said, we want you to go. So we went over And we get to the school and they're still running. The students are still running for cover. The shooter is still active. And here I am with a setup. We always had a setup with us. Here I am with a setup going live on KFI as kids are screaming and running around us and parents are starting to come. And it was after that event, the gravity of all of that, that we told KFI we were not going to cover any more school shootings.
No.
Because we thought that it was encouraging others to create these kinds of events.
Yeah,
and so,
like
and right. Plus, going up to a parent who is not sure whether their kid is dead or alive and asking them how they feel was not the kind of journalism that we wanted to do.
I want to ask one last question to you, Karel. I know you got a hard stop, but I want to just ask real quickly.
Oh no, I have a show at 10:30, but it's up to it's your show. We can do it.
Good. Oh, irrespective of time, we always start. We hit the clock at 57:50, right? We got to make sure that now.
Well, because my concern is that we haven't really touched on. I have a lot of pet peeves about radio. And one of the pet peeves is A, it doesn't take any chances anymore, which is a big pet peeve. But B, we have got to do something. Podcasting, they saw as the democratization of radio. That's just not true. Let me tell you why. 2 reasons why radio is still so important. First of all, I was over at Pink Box Donuts here in Vegas, where they have a very paltry vegan assortment. I am a rabid vegan.
Right.
And one of their new vegan donuts was called the Berry White, Berry White.
Oh, yeah.
And there are these 220-somethings behind the counter, embryos with legs, basically. And I look at them and I say, do any of you know who Berry White is? And they both look at each other and they're like,
No.
I'm all, but you're selling a donut named Berry White. I said, okay, Barbara Streisand. And they both said, for me, she's the Holy Grail. So when they were like, is she like some sort of singer? I was like, oh. And now the people in the store are actually doing the same thing. They're like, are you kidding me? And so I gave a few more names of people that they should know. And I said to them, here's the problem with streaming versus radio.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, when I listened to Kiss FM or actually Kiss AM in Los Angeles, when I was listening to radio played a variety of music on one station.
Yes.
Okay. So you would hear the Beatles, and then you'd hear disco, and then you'd hear something from the 50s or 60s, and then you'd hear, rock. And so, for instance, I hate the Beatles. I've done many shows about why I hate the Beatles, and I get all these hate calls and people telling me, how can you hate the Beatles? But I know every one of their songs because they were played on commercial radio. Commercial radio gave us a greater variety of music. Now we get an algorithm. And the same thing goes with opinions. Talk radio, when it first started, and even with the fairness doctrine from Reagan, which we could spend an hour talking about whether repealing that was good or bad for talk radio. I think it was good, but, we'll see. Anyway, so talk radio, like KFI, even KGO, presented a variety of opinions.
Right.
It wasn't an echo chamber. And now with the where they have decentralized radio, local radio in whatever market you're listening to me in right now, most of the local radio in your market is gone. Your radio is controlled by people that do not live in your market.
And the talk shows are all echo chambers. They're all echo chambers. No one of a dissenting opinion can be on another show.
That's exactly right. Like with MSNBC, someone said, why aren't you on guest? I used to do it all the time, and CNN and all those. And they said, why don't you go back? I said, now they just want me to reiterate what the other guests are saying. And it's like, I don't want to do that.
No, the producers tell you what they got to say. No. So I'll say it like this. So Randy Rhodes was working a station where I worked over in WJNO. And at the time when she was doing local there, she would take the sending calls because the producer that was there always took whoever was on the calls and she'd go and take them on. But when she went to network and she went to on her own network, it was echo chamber. And it changed everything. The whole dynamic of the show was not even fun anymore because it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to go ahead and be on the right of everything. But sometimes maybe you want to have somebody else to go ahead and like at least defend, have the chance to go and defend what you're saying and not just be able to go and just spew out the same kind of talk.
Well, on KFI, we did that all the time.
Right.
We had Pat Robertson come on. And we told his producer, he's running for president. We are not going to agree on the gay issue, so tell him not to bring it up.
Right.
There's plenty of other stuff we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, halfway through, he brought up the gay issue and we had to have a fight. But, you know, so we would often, we also were told not to do gay issues on KFI. We were told we were the gay issue. So they even took advertising to outlaw gay marriage on our show. And we had a fit. And they said, look, you can come on air right afterwards and denounce the ad and denounce whatever. They wouldn't do that today, by the way. They would not do that today. But they did it back then. We had to sit there and listen to ads on the station about how Andrew and I should not be able to get married. But that was because we didn't want anything to be, we didn't want to be pigeonholed. When GLAAD came to picket Dr. Laura, they were downstairs picketing. We, the only two gay hosts working, went down and asked them, why are you picketing her? They're going to put her name on the news. They're not going to talk about what you guys want to talk about. Why aren't you here empowering us? Why aren't you here being pro Karel and Andrew?
Correct.
Instead, you're here picketing a woman who could care less about you. She's not going to lose a dime. She's not going to get canceled. That's not how it's going to happen.
No.
I think that radio today is afraid. It's afraid of controversy.
The corporations.
You know,
I want to make it. It's the corporations that are afraid.
Yes, absolutely. And the corporations are run by an increasingly smaller number of people who are funded by Blackstone and other conservative hedge funds that own these radio stations. Like iHeartMedia is owned by conservatives. You have Cumulus owned by conservatives. Yeah. I mean, most of the major media companies are now owned by conservatives.
It's all private equity. They're all vultures just picking away the bones at all these stations. But I'll tell you, that's where on my program here, I like to go ahead and just go after the fact that if we can take those corporate outlets away and make them have to go ahead and unload those stations so that local owners can own again, radio will thrive. It will absolutely change the whole dynamic, and radio as the one medium left. Listen, newspapers can go extinct, television could go extinct, but radio could survive AI. It could survive everything because the way it's
a prime example of what you're saying is in an emergency, when all hell's breaking loose,
earthquakes,
where do you turn? Yeah. You know, in LA or even here in Vegas, you still turn to KNX 1070 Los Angeles because it's a 24/7 news station. And they have reporters. KFI got rid of their newsroom. They had a world-class, award-winning newsroom. They got rid of it. So now the news comes from someplace else. But there still are 24/7 newsrooms at some radio stations, and those are the ones we turn to in a crisis. Yeah. I laughed the other day. I was watching Hulu, and I'm too cheap to pay for it without ads. And I go, so we went from TV with ads, fast is what we call it, to TiVo, which allowed us to get rid of the ads. You know, with TiVo, we could fast forward through the ads. Yeah. Then we went to streaming, and oh my God, look, streaming, no ads, and we just pay a small fee and we get all this content. Then all of a sudden, we're back to paying for streaming, but with ads. Yes. I'm like, well, what's the difference between this and commercial television now? There isn't.
No.
All of the streamers have become commercial networks now. They've gone right back to the old model of ads during the programming. So I'm like, what are we paying for? So now they figured out a way to make us pay for their network with ads.
Yes.
When you can get it over the air for free.
Right.
And that's the thing about radio. You know, when SiriusXM, God bless SiriusXM, truly, God bless them. But when SiriusXM started, I said, that's a cute idea if it does it without ads, because you're paying money. Mm-hmm. But now they have ads. And I'm like, well, they're just like commercial radio now. Right. You know, some of their stations have ads. And so I'm like, we're going back again. Things are cyclical. And so now people are rediscovering that, guess what? You can listen to music and talk and all of that for free on something called a radio.
Yeah.
You know, and radio has changed to streaming, but it's still radio behind the stream. KGay in Palm Springs, I listen to because they play my music. But I listen to them, you know, streaming. When I want to hear KNX 1070, I still listen to it streaming. If I want to hear music I can now relate to, I listen to KEarth 101, which when I first moved to LA in the 70s, I told a friend, if I ever know all the songs on KEarth 101, shoot me. Well, guess what? Time to shoot me, because now I know all the songs on KEarth 101 because I got old. So we're rediscovering radio. The problem is the young people today don't have the attention span for the radio that you and I are used to. You know, people say, why do you do a half-hour podcast instead of an hour or two? And because David Hall came to me and said, you're lucky if you get 10 minutes out of people nowadays.
Right.
Like, you know, so he's like, why talk for an hour or two? He's like, just do a half hour. So I do. And he's right. Average time spent listening, 14 minutes out of 30.
Yeah, to respect the listener's time. They're not going to have all this time. They're not going to listen to Joe Rogan and just say all across. Well, no, another thing I got to ask you too is now that if you're going to do a show, you know, you can have guests on, you can not have guests. But the one thing is, if people are coming back to go and hear Karel, that's what they want to go and do, not anybody else. And know that, okay, you're going to have this half hour to go and spend time with you. They'll have it. And they always know they can have that friendly voice.
Well, even backstage, you're aware now that some guests charge to be on your show. I'm like, I don't pay guests to be on my show. Because I'll call and there'll be someone in the news and I want to talk to them about whatever it is. You know how it is. You want to book a guest about something in the show. I mean, even through Quoted, you use Quoted. You get a guest and they're all, what's the appearance fee? And it's like, honey, this ain't late night TV. You ain't getting an appearance fee. It's like, you're a guest to tell me about your book or to tell me about your movie or to tell me about your whatever, or to weigh in on this news topic that I'm given. I'm not going to pay you on my show to come and do that. The notion of paying guests is like so foreign. It goes against, because I have a journalism degree. It goes against everything in my training. It's like AI. God bless AI. I use it as a tool. But the fact that there are newspapers using AI to actually write stories that they print is so offensive to me. It's just offensive.
You know what's going to happen? Eventually, all these deals that the AI companies like OpenAI or whatever, they're all making deals to go and get to the archives of these newspapers and start writing for them. They're infiltrating right now, and they're giving them money just to keep those newspapers alive, those magazines alive long enough so they could take the intellectual property and just buy it pennies of the dollar. And then they're going to run it with the same branding up front, and no one will know the
difference. Think radio's not doing the same thing. If you don't think someone's filling Rush Limbaugh's voice into all of his shows into an AI right now so they can resurrect. I tell you, we are going to see dead talk show hosts having new talk shows. You wait and see.
Hey, you're going to be. Give me Casey Kasem on AI. I'll listen to American Top 40 again. I would love that, actually, if they could do it.
Yeah, me too. I still listen to it, actually. There's some stations that replay American Top 40, and I'll listen to it.
Man, one of my favorite things growing up was that. It was just, listening to him every Sunday morning was great. We need that's the creativity we used to have.
That's appointment listening, and I miss that. I miss appointment listening because nowadays people want to hear what they want to hear when they want to hear it on their own schedule. And I appreciate that. I get it. I understand. But there was something to be said about 7 o'clock at night. You knew Walter Cronkite was going to be there and he was going to tell you what was going on. And so you waited for that. You're like, oh, Walter's on in 10 minutes or whatever. And with radio, the same thing.
Yep.
You knew when you woke up in the morning, Rick Dees was going to be doing something disco duck or something completely crazy on his show. Ryan and I are friends now. So, Ryan and I have been friends for 25 years. Ryan Seacrest. And we did a TV show together with Mark Summers, the Ultimate Revenge. It was a reality show that pioneered the way. And I did it with Mark Summers and with Ryan. They hired me because Ryan was too bitchy. He wouldn't do all the dirty stuff. He wouldn't do food fights or go to a dump or what, and I would. And of course I always got him filthy anyway. I mean, when we did the food fight thing and he breezes in at the end to do the wrap up, I just go up and give him a big old hug drenched in ketchup,
I gotta ask you this too. You ever notice when you watch on TV, if you're trying to watch an award show or game shows, things like that, where they need a master ceremonies, don't you always notice the radio people are the ones that have always been able to go and do that and efficiently and do a great job? Some of the best game show hosts, some of the best people that have done master ceremonies things and still today are radio people. The fact that Ryan Seacrest
it's true. And the funny part is that radio people do well as comics, but comics do not do well as radio people. And Bill Maher is the biggest attestation to that. Bill Maher tried to get a radio show going for over a decade, including on KFI. He sat in on KFI he has. But Bill Maher runs out of steam because he's used to coming out and doing a 20-minute monologue, and then that's it, cutting to the guest. So his radio show, the first 20 minutes, brilliant. The next 2.5 hours, just not so good. And that's because radio people are very unique. We have a large space to fill, 3 hours. We can't be dull. We can't repeat. And so we do better hosting events than comics do hosting radio.
True.
It's really, and David Hall is the one who told me that. He's like, comics don't do well on radio, but radio people do well as comics. And he's right. I do a one-man show, and it's a 2-hour show, and I have to actually set a timer because I'll go over. I'll be like, because I'm used to talking for 3 hours, so I'll go, and comics don't do that. They do like 30 minutes. Like I tried to do the Laugh Factory and Comedy Store. I can't do that because they have these lights, like red light, green light. Right. I'm like, I'm not a car. What is going on here? And second of all, when the red light's flashing, it's been 12 minutes. I'm just getting started. So it's like, I don't know what y'all are doing in 12 minutes. It's like, I hate to have sex with y'all. Do the red light and green light for that too? Yeah. So radio, it is possibly been the most unique medium that we invented. When Marconi first sent that signal across, I've been to Ireland where the transmitter is, that where Marconi sent the signal across the Atlantic. But as it unfolded, it became one of the most powerful mediums in the world. And I think we in America, and mainly in America, I think we forget that it is still a very powerful medium, because when you travel to other countries, commercial radio has a much bigger role in their life, because it is still one of the things that is free that they can get beamed into their house. Commercial radio and commercial television. My friend tells me the story of it when he was in Iraq, and they were the first Desert Storm, and they were clearing all the villages and everything. And they go to this remote village that only has power for 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. And they're clearing the houses looking for, I'm not going to say terrorists because I'm not going to get into the debate of who was a terrorist and who wasn't. Right. But they're looking for insurgents. Like the ones on January 6th. But anyway, and he goes into this house in the middle of the Iraqi desert, and it's on a Tuesday where they have power for 4 hours, and he walks into the house, and this house, they ain't got a pot to piss in. The house is made out of mud, but on top of the refrigerator is a TV, a little tiny one, and on the TV is Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
Oprah. In the middle of Iraq, in a town with only power a few hours a day, and what do they got on their TV? They got Oprah. Wow. That's how powerful the medium of television and radio is. Yeah. And we should never forget that, because when the power goes off, and it will one day, and when the data centers go dark, we're all going to want something to turn to, and radio will still be there. It'll still be, I
appreciate you going full circle on that. I really do. I got to mention this as well. The fact that, for me, it's always being strategic about what needs to be said to people that needs for radio to turn back around. One of the things I've been trying to lobby right now for years is, National Association of Broadcasters, of course, that lobbying firm that keeps, keep the fat cat senators happy and all this, so that we can't make changes. Because one of the things I'd love to have is, you have the Music Modernization Act, the Local Radio Freedom Act, all these royalties that songwriters, that artists should be getting back for the music that's being played on the radio.
Yes.
If you got that act in particular to be passed in Congress, and all these major, high wattage stations, which are all owned by these corporations, if they were going to be forced to go ahead and pay, $100,000 or whatever a year on royalties, then that would be the way to go ahead and unload those stations and make them implode, because they can't withstand it. They can't take that much debt. There's no way for them to go ahead and take that cost, incur it, and think they can still operate. I wish for something like that to happen. We need an implosion of those.
Well, I'm trying to make that happen. I'm on the board, the music advocacy board at Grammy. I'm a voting member of Grammy because of my music. Uh-huh. And I'm on the music advocacy board as well as the DEI panel. And we are not shying away. We are still calling it the DEI panel, and Donald Trump can, but the bill that you're speaking about, I just met with Representative Susie Lee here in Nevada with a group of other artists here in Nevada. Right. Chris Cox, famous producer, DJ, Angela Winbush, famous R&B singer, Denise Williams. We all went over and met with Susie Lee about the bill that right now, when something's played on radio, the publisher, the songwriters get the money. The artist and the musicians get nothing.
Right.
So there is a bill now before Congress, which we are rallying for and has bipartisan support, to give the artists and the musicians a cut of that money, because it's only fair, because if you don't have publishing, which the labels often take from you, then your radio, this is a really big issue with me. I'm very passionate about this because Spotify, all of them, they don't pay 0.003 cent. A million plays get you $4,000.
Right.
I mean, that's, meanwhile, my friend Thea Austin, lead singer of Snap, Rhythm as a Dancer, is one of her biggest hits. Back before streaming, her royalty checks every year, because she wrote Rhythm as a Dancer and sang it, her royalty checks, 50, 100, 120, 150, 200,000, Now with streaming, she's lucky if she gets 10 grand a year. And yet on Spotify, Rhythm as a Dancer has been played 40 million times. And had she gotten 40 million radio plays, well, I'd be visiting her in a mansion and, wherever. But because it spins and there's no obligation from radio to pay. And so radio is fighting us on this. They don't want to pay the artists. They don't want to pay, so they're fighting. But I agree. And I think that would bring some of the artists back to radio. In other words, not only if radio started paying artists more than Spotify and Tidal and all that, then Taylor Swift could say, okay, I'm going to debut my record on the iHeartRadio network. Right. I'm not going to debut it on Spotify. I'm not going to give it to. So it could be like the movie. I think that streaming should be like movies. I'll leave you with this for how I think radio should.
Sure.
If I ruled the world, if I were, Mel Karmazin or somebody, if I, had the power, I would make radio like movies. I would encourage artists to service their music to radio for 4 or 6 weeks first. Service it to radio first. And yes, sell it. You can sell it through iTunes or sell it through, but don't offer it for free streaming for at least, say, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So that would drive people to radio to hear the new music. Taylor Swift's fans would flock to radio stations if they knew they could only hear her new album on iHeartMedia or on Cumulus or on whatever. So I would like to see radio take the Hollywood model where an artist releases music, puts it out on radio, and then streaming can have it 4 weeks later. And the same with talk shows. I would love it if people like me, Stephanie Miller, you mentioned Joe Rogan, David Pakman, you mentioned Randy, she retired for health reasons. And I didn't know this because she told me, I emailed her. I heard on her show, she said, I tried to find someone to fill in for me 3 days a week, and then I would do 2 days, but I couldn't find anybody. And I emailed her, I said, Randy, why didn't you ask me? She goes, they never told me you were available. I would have asked you in a moment's notice. She's all, I totally would have done that.
Yeah.
And I was like, but yeah, so I could have been Randy 3 days a week, and then she would have been herself 2 days a week. But, and that's sad because I would have really liked that. And I would have liked it to keep her going.
Right.
In other words, it would have been great exposure for me and my brand and all of that, which is Really Karel, youtube.com/Really Karel, or just the Karel Cast on all streaming services. But it would have been great for me, but it would have kept Randy's voice because we are losing so many voices that are not Charlie Kirk and that are not, conservative. Yeah. We're losing so many voices because the political climate is such, they just don't want to do it. And I don't blame them. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get on my show every day. Like today, the last thing I want to talk about today is what Donald Trump is up to. I don't care. To me, that ship has sailed. He's a traitor. Yeah. If you support him, good for you. But he's bad for our country. And I don't want to sit here and every day say, oh, look, he's bad. He's done this. Oh, look, radio needs to remember that it has to be many things. And it's forgotten that.
Oh, yeah.
Our biggest topics that we used to do were not political. Our biggest topics were always the everyday life topic. The biggest show the biggest show I ever did, and we just found out that David Letterman copied, because David Hall had lunch with David Letterman's old producer, and he said, we copied Karel on our show. And David's like, what? So my roommate, Gary Alexander, passed away of AIDS in the 90s or early 2000, 1999.
Yeah.
And Gary used to work at McDonald's. And I knew the owner of the McDonald's, John Fosnight, and he was gay and I was gay, and we knew each other. And he owned 4 McDonald's. He was very big, and he owned the ones inside Disneyland. He was very big in the McDonald's highest one. So Gary used to always complain to me about the drive-through when he had to work the drive-through. He would say he wanted to cuss these people out, but he never got the chance. So after he died, I called John Fosnight, now dead as well, and said, John, I want to go live on KFI working your drive-through at the McDonald's.
Right.
Except I'm going to be me working it.
Yes.
Meaning me. And he said, okay. I said, you don't have to get corporate approval. He goes, they'd never approve it. So I'm just going to say, yes, let's just do it. So we did it from 5 to 8 o'clock live on Afternoon Drive, where I'm like, this lady orders and I go, honey, that's a fillet of fish and fried. Why are you ordering a Diet Coke? You know your fat ass wants a milkshake. You know, so stuff like that. We did that for 3 hours. Yeah. To this day, people walk up to me and say, that McDonald's bit, it was the thing. You know, it was so funny. And then David Letterman's producer heard it and had David Letterman go work in a fast food restaurant on his show.
Oh, yeah.
I was homeless on the corner of Wilshire and on Western with various signs and doing what the listeners would tell me to do in my ears. And Andrew would tell me what to do, like get out of your wheelchair and sing Billie Jean. And it all came from me wondering which sign that these people hold up would make more money. We'll work for food, we'll work for baby diapers, we'll work for beer, or I need pot.
Right.
Which one? The pot one made by far the most money, by the way. And then I had a homeless guy almost beat me up because I was infringing upon his space.
Right.
But this is the kind of radio that we used to do, and that kind of radio is gone now. Man on the streets, where you just walk up and
pranks. No, yeah, exactly. No.
Right. And so if radio would remember that it was fun, then I think it would have a big resurgence. Because radio used to be a freaking ball. I mean, you had me and Andrew doing weird stunts. You had Phil Hendry being 12 voices. You had, morning shows where they're like Howard, where they're just doing all kinds of absurdity. And all of a sudden, corporations said, less fun, more money. And it became the homogenized.
Falling in line, waiting to get a chance to get a spot on those shows, live reads, all that stuff. Well, I would tell people, and that's to close out here, that radio stations, record labels, by the way, the music labels need to go and pay attention and say, listen, you want to start making money, and it's not just on streaming and not just on other merch or tours and things like that. Get back and start meddling with the radio stations and tell them, hey, we're going to start making money together. Get the royalties going on with us. Start paying our royalties, and then we're going to start giving back to you and make it cyclical. And let's get back to that part. And I honestly think if they were to realize there's corporate, there are other ad models besides what you're doing right now that gets you 1% of an increase. You can tell shareholders.
Well, Jorge, you know this. Hey. You know that they won't do that until someone shows them they can make money at it. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're followers now. They're not leaders. They're followers. Right. And that's the problem. We need leaders again in media to step forward and say, I am not going to be a big part of media. I'm going to shape media. I am going to reinvent. And I think you're right. We have all these signals out there waiting for something magical to happen on them. Yeah. And they can. And if someone, well, you should run a station, hell. Someone visionary, someone that actually is not afraid to take a chance, and companies that aren't afraid to lose. News departments used to be untouchable.
Yeah.
And then they got moved into the entertainment division where they had to make money, and it was the death of them. If we could just go back a little bit to where a station could lose a little money for a while, but while trying things out, it would give people like you and I a playground again. I've been so blessed that for 35 years, I've had a 50,000 watt playground to just go and play and have the best time talking crap to people, whatever, interviewing presidents or janitors, or, being at the Oscars on the red carpet, or God, being in the swamp somewhere trying to, radio used to be fun. And I'll close with this because I do have a 10:30 show, which is heard every day on YouTube at youtube.com/Willie Karel. It is my goal with my show now, and I think it should be all of our goals because in fact, my topic today is a news story about how we have now become complacent to the horrors around us. There's all these horrors going on, and we're just going on our everyday life like these horrors aren't there. We're
Yeah.
oblivious to them. And we're not having much fun.
No.
Depression's at an all-time high. Mental health crises are everywhere. I think we all need to step back for a moment and realize we're not getting out of this alive. Nothing is so serious, and have some fun. Radio and podcasts and broadcasting used to be fun.
Yeah.
If we could make it fun again, make it to where all ages and follow the David Hall triangle, which I'll leave with you. This is gold. You can quote me on this. This is right from David Hall from the moment we first sat down with him. If radio would remember the golden triangle of radio, which is every time you open this microphone, you've got one of three things or a combination of three things to do. Make it interesting, it's informative, relative, and entertaining. That's the triangle. Informative, tell me something that I don't know or in a way that I don't know it. Relevant, tell me something that relates to my life in this car or in this house or whatever. Or entertaining, make me laugh, make me think, so you have one of three things or all of every topic, every show, every host. Informative, relevant, entertaining. Get back to that triangle, and we'd have a business again.
Hey, thank you, Karel. Thank you again for being on with me. Really appreciate you taking time out. Really enjoyed
Thank
the
you.
conversation.
Absolutely. Me too. I love talking radio. It's been such a big part of my life. So, and a good part of my life, not a bad part, except when you get fired. But when Howard Stern first met me, he said, "Don't worry, you're going to be fired." I'm like, "What? What do you know? You have what it's like?" And he goes, "I've been fired 33 times. You're going to be fired.
Badge
Just
of
don't
honor.
worry." Phil said the same thing. Phil said, "When you're fired, don't let it set you back. Just get another job because guess what? We all get fired." So, we all get fired.
Thanks, Karel. I got to run, but thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure. All the best. Take care.